All right, we just sat down with Danny Lafuente, partner of the Lab Miami and founder of Simple Spirits. Awesome conversation covering the history of the lab, tech professionals, what's needed here. What did you take away?
I mean, he not only is an entrepreneur and how he founded the lab, but being able to build out that vodka company as well, man, and actually having it do good for others, it's phenomenal, man. It was a phenomenal conversation. I loved it.
Yep, I love the part where we talked about the tech professionals and specifically non-startup tech professionals, more like big company tech professionals, and how they, that group really needs to be nurtured here in Miami. So a lot of great takeaways in that. And with that, here's our conversation with Danny Lafuente.
Enjoy.
Welcome to Reefside Radio. We're here at the Lab Miami in the Miami Podcast studio. I'm joined by my partner, Eric Gavin. How you doing, Eric?
I'm doing pretty good, man.
Awesome.
Good stuff. Day. It's a good day.
Stuff. And our special guest today, we have the man, the myth, the legend, Danny Lafuente. We're going to get into Danny's background, his role with the original Lab Miami, now with the Lab Miami V2, I don't know what we're calling it, the next phase.
The rebirth.
I love it.
Sounds more impactful.
Yeah, the rebirth. Yeah, better than the V2.
I like it. It's much better than the V2.
And we're also going to hear about his company, Simple Spirits, which is going to be awesome. You've been a founder and entrepreneur, sounds like just about your whole life.
Yeah, I think I wrote my first business plan at 8 years old. It was an ice cream shop where you could, meet your tutor and get your homework done. And
what was your
if you
best
finished
flavor?
in time. They were all, it was called Ice Cream Shop. So the logo was like an eye on top of the cone, and it was like Halloween themed. I think I might have wrote this business plan during Halloween.
The sugar was flowing.
I was very impressionable. But yeah, did not move forward with that. Couldn't get the funding, really. Similar funding environment.
It's kind of like the lab. Maybe that was the early start. You come in, great space, you get your work done, mentorship,
have some ice cream. It was very similar.
That's awesome. Well, how's your day going? How's your week?
Week is going great. Was telling Eric before the show, had a very busy July 4th weekend. I have 2 kids at home, and we were in the pool 3 days in a row at 4 different houses, and we survived.
That's good.
2 little kids on a holiday weekend. That's all you can do.
That's
just survive.
Good. Are they scared of fireworks? Are they?
No.
Okay.
My 1-year-old's afraid of nothing, and my 4-year-old has gotten over that fear. Actually enjoys them quite a bit. So
awesome. Good stuff. Yeah. Good stuff. Well, here at Reefside Radio, this is, this table, this is for conversations with Miami's change makers. And you have been a huge change maker. You're kind of the change maker that allowed the other change makers to make changes. And 100%. So I want to dive into all of that and creating the lab and all that. But first, I'd really like you to share your professional background. I know there was really cool stuff with the Cuban American National Foundation, and then you moved to the Northeast and came back, the return. So take us through it. Ever since maybe that first business plan, ice cream, if you could just go month by month throughout your life.
So a few years later, I entered puberty. No, I'm kidding. Graduated, went to Ransom, graduated. That's where I know Weefy from, my co-founder at the lab back in the day, and my other co-founder, Elisa, as well. We were all kind of Ransom classmates, graduated class of 05. Went to the University of Pennsylvania, studied international relations, foolishly thought I wanted to get into politics, quickly decided I did not want to do that. My background is I'm half Cuban, half Spanish. Growing up in Miami, obviously the Cuban side typically resonates a bit more. And so, wrote my thesis on transnational politics. So it's essentially how folks from the diaspora can influence policy decisions at more of a grassroots level, and started working. My first job out of college was working for the Cuban American National Foundation, as you mentioned, and the Foundation for Human Rights in Cuba. So one that was more kind of politically oriented, and the other one that was more focused on supporting human rights activists on the island. Extremely fulfilling work. It was a very exciting time in kind of U.S.-Cuba policy, but I had this itch to go back to my first business plan days, and wanted to be an entrepreneur. Kind of also, not bash nonprofits or anything like that, but I did find that, sometimes in the nonprofit world, there's not with my organizations, of course, but there is this kind of complacency, and I wanted to go after a model where you can have impact, but still hold yourself accountable to kind of bottom line principles. And so, kind of went on this path of social entrepreneurship, and that's really what kind of led Weefy and I and Elisa to kind of start the lab. And really it was, we were part jealous of our classmates who had, gone to some of the other tech hubs, San Francisco, Boulder, Boston at the time, even New York, had a pretty strong ecosystem. This was back in 2010, 2011, we were starting to ideate on it. And we always knew Miami to be a very entrepreneurial city, but we felt like it lacked the same kind of spaces and institutions and players that some of these other more robust and matured ecosystems had. So we said, hey, look, let's just build a space. Let's small space, and we actually started in this building. So we're in the Wynwood building here in Wynwood, and started in a 700 square foot space down the hall. We're bursting at the seams pretty early on. Goldman was eventually like, okay, you guys gotta find a new space.
What was the first thing you did there?
So the first thing we did, when we got, I think, the lease to the space April of 2012, I want to say. And the first thing we did was we drove around the neighborhood. Weefy borrowed his parents' pickup truck, I believe. We went around the neighborhood and picked up pallets, because at that point, Wynwood was still very much a kind of warehousing and distribution district. Panther Coffee was, I don't even think they were serving coffee yet. I think they were just roasting coffee, right? There's certainly nothing
that big
else in
old
the
roaster that they had?
that's all they had. That's all they were doing. We picked up pallets because we had spent all of our money on the security deposit and first month's rent. So we looked up on Etsy how to build furniture out of pallets.
Big old empty room.
Spent a couple $100 at Home Depot and asked some friends to borrow some tools. And the first couple of weeks we were just kind of building furniture and inviting folks from our network to kind of come in and see us build the furniture, just talk about what they were working on. And I think it was kind of that early scrappy community vibe that folks resonated with, and then we were really one of the first groups to really do kind of tech focused events and host tech speakers, and so that's why with certain events we were just kind of pouring out into the hallways here, and we saw that there was an opportunity to build something bigger and better. At that point, WeWork had just opened up their 5th or 6th location globally. There was other kind of early co-working kind of shared office models down here already in Pipeline and Burrow. But they were more just kind of cookie cutter shared office spaces. They weren't really like the community center vibe that we were really going for. And so, we were able to work with a group of other stakeholders to raise a bit of money, including the Knight Foundation, and went from 700 square feet to almost 10,000 square feet down the street. And it was very much a, field of dreams kind of situation. Built it, they came, right?
I was going to ask about that. Was there like a 200-page business plan where we interviewed 100 people, we sent a survey out, or was it just like, this needs to happen because we want it and hopefully other people want it too?
No, and working on business plans, doing customer discovery are things that I stress to everyone, and it's so important. But we did none of it. We shot from the hip. We went with our gut, and fortunately, it all worked out for us. And I think we were so sure and confident about everything that was happening in the city at the time. You had groups like Refresh Miami that were killing it, and whose membership was kind of felt like it was doubling month over month, and they just needed a consistent place to do things. And there was some really interesting developers and entrepreneurs and builders that were down here. They were just kind of dispersed throughout the city, and I think it was really just about creating kind of a common clubhouse vibe for them all that allowed us to just bring everyone together. And from there, kind of serendipity did its thing, and dots were connected, and folks kind of continued to build and grow, and it was great. And that early phase of Miami tech, was a lot of fun,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
There was a lot of open space. There was a lot of opportunity. Folks were extra supportive because I think everyone wanted the same goal of having a more robust and mature
Yeah.
ecosystem.
Yeah.
And so, there was a lot of, it was easy, right? There was camaraderie, and I think at that point, what was important was just creating a space where folks can step outside of their silo and come together, but they were eager to do so.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure we'll get into this later, but the silos we see now, and the reason why I came back to the project to be that bridge again, to be that neutral ground, it's less so that there needs to be this common space. I think folks just kind of retreated to their own silos, and so it's less so about not having a common shared space, and just it's more about getting people comfortable with sharing a space again.
Yeah. Yeah. Where did the inspiration come from? Like when you were in school or with the Cuban American National Foundation, like where did you see the magic of like, oh, if we bring great people together, put them in the same room, have programming going on, then magic's going to happen? Or was it just like, I don't know, did it just hit you over the head one day, like on a bike ride? Or did you start seeing things working besides maybe like a WeWork or something that was getting started?
And not to bash the city that I love so much, but it was just like, it was hard to find smart people where you can have like intelligent, sophisticated conversations. And it wasn't just about the dolphins or, going to the beach or like, whatever it was. And I knew those people existed. We knew those people existed. We knew that there was, really smart folks, passionate folks down here. It was hard to find them. And really, those kind of early days was just about creating density for tech, density for thoughtful people, density for other folks, and at that point it wasn't just tech. We, very much engaged the creative communities and kind of, the more traditional builders that were down here, folks that, were more corporate entrepreneurs, intrapreneurs, what we were calling them, right? So, it wasn't so much like an aha moment, but it was like, we know these people are here. We just need to create a space that they're comfortable and excited about coming out to. And it was tough, especially choosing Wynwood all those years ago when there was really nothing in the neighborhood. It was a neighborhood folks drove around. They tended to avoid. Now they do the same thing, but not because there's nothing here, more just the traffic is impossible.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's, there's a lot of similarities from 10 plus years ago to now.
Yeah.
But obviously for, kind of very, very different reasons.
That's so interesting because I remember kind of my first entry into the Miami tech scene was probably like 2014, 15, something in there. And I remember I worked for Brian and Maria at the launch pad at UM.
Another two OGs.
Yeah, and they were, running Refresh, and I was probably like 20 years old or 19 or something, and they're like, oh, you want to come to this event? And I remember going, it was in kind of like an amphitheater. It might have been at Miami-Dade College, and there was big speakers there. The room was full. It was probably, 200 people. I remember being like, oh, my God, like the whole tech community's here. Like everyone is in tech, and it kind of felt like that back then, that it was like, it was very connected.
It might have been the whole tech community at the time. 200 people.
Yeah, I think they had like two big
time.
events per year at that time, and it was like a big keynote or, fireside chat and all that. And it's amazing how it's changed so much now, where that's going to happen tonight probably here, and tomorrow and Thursday is 200 people, and that's just scratching the surface. So I guess what were the people doing? What were the startups? What were some of the change makers in that, I don't know, I'm going to call it a freshman cohort of like Miami Tech?
Yeah, I mean, so you talked about Refresh, right? And Refresh started as just like a meetup like at Starbucks, and they I think for the first, and I think they just turned 19, or they're about to turn 19, or they're going on 20. So they've been going strong for a while. Those first few years, they were meeting at a Starbucks or whatever coffee shop would have the space, and it was just a group of, again, builders and developers just talking and sharing and trying to help each other with their individual projects. And eventually, as there was a greater interest in that, and this also came at a similar time to UM and FIU starting to put more emphasis on their engineering programs. coding boot camps kind of sprouting up everywhere, right? And so it wasn't just, did you spend 4 years of college, studying engineering, but there was now, even for folks who had studied other things, pivots to tech, right? It was also coming after a financial downturn in 2008, 2009, 2010 from the mortgage crisis and all of that stuff, and so folks were looking for different jobs. But back to your question, I think that folks like Refresh just really, I'd like to take some of the credit with the lab and helping build that physical space, but Refresh really did so much work in terms of being that initial glue for the community and creating at least that once a month or once a quarter kind of thing where folks knew they can count on good content, meeting good people, hearing about new ideas and new businesses and new technologies, and so they were super instrumental in that, and with that, folks came out of the woodworks, right? So there's some cracked out engineers in the city. There always have been, but they stayed home because there really wasn't any program that they felt spoke to them, and so Refresh was really by kind of creating that programming helped build more of that culture that the lab was then able to kind of piggyback off of and kind of continue to grow and nurture down here. So.
At what point did you feel like the community was hitting this like flywheel point where things were just rolling?
I think it was 13, 14, 15. I mean, that was also a peak focus area or focus time for the Knight Foundation to invest in the community. Right. And we can get into this later too, but I think, the Knight Foundation is also extremely responsible for kind of the growth of the system and its maturity. And identifying the right change makers and the right organizations that kind of helped usher in that early wave and funding them through, in many cases, through sustainability, not always, but helping fund a lot of those organizations to the point where Refresh is still around in no small part to the support. Same thing with the lab that the Knight Foundation provided all those years. And it was necessary because at that point I remember we tried to host a hackathon in 2014. It was for the National Day of Civic Hacking, and we tried to get some data from the city. This is in 2014. And so yeah, sure, come in, let's talk. What kind of data do you want? And we were just going to meet with one person from the transit team. It ended up being a 30-person meeting. There was a dozen lawyers.
You can't meet with just one
hacking.
person.
They're hacking. So what exactly are they going to do? We just want some data that these developers can play with and make cool stuff out of. And they're yeah, but we need to give them access to our systems. Yeah. And it was just okay, you know what? Give us whatever you got. So I think they gave us a few, CSVs of just bus schedules.
Most people don't know that's pre any open portal type of situation where people can just easily access. We could jump online right now and access different cities' data points. And everything. At that time, he had to go in and ask because all of this is lock and key. Yep. And they're what do you want to do with this? Because it wasn't common for governments to hold this data out like that. Yeah. Even if the data wasn't sensitive anyway. It's incredible, man.
Yeah.
So what were some of those big, if you look back on maybe the first couple of years, so how long, I guess maybe let me start there. So how long were you, formally with the lab? 2012 you launched.
So 2011 we entered the Miami Herald Business Plan competition. Did not win.
I remember that being a big deal though. Do they still do that?
They do. They do still do that. And it really helped for us cement our interest in wanting to do this and it helped us go through the exercise of kind of some of the early analysis and necessary business planning that we would need to go out and get funding for it. So it was super helpful in from that respect. Nancy was one of the judges. I don't hold it against her, but Nancy, I'm sure you'll listen to this. We love you. We love you anyways. And it was that initial chip on the shoulder actually that I think really motivated us to take it to bigger and better things. But so we started that 2012, opened up this space. 2013 in February, we opened up the space that's now 400 Northwest 26, now recently rebranded as the Dock, and was with the project until about 2015 when my wife and I moved to New York. She was doing her MBA up there, and I started working for the NYU Stern Entrepreneurship Center and kind of running some accelerators there. So from 2011 ideation through 2015 was, pretty involved on a day-to-day basis, and kind of some of the early things that really helped, where we saw the ecosystem coming together. One that definitely comes to mind was PayPal. They had a hackathon, kind of a touring hackathon called Battle Hack.
Okay.
And that really helped. I think that was like the first big hackathon that most people remember that are part of the scene, still part of the scene now. And I think for those that were just founders and builders, actually connecting with these engineers, they're like, wow, there is the talent here, and there's some really interesting things happening. So I think that was one. Obviously, hosting Refresh for some of their meetups was also really positive. Numi Accelerator program, which I think was sponsored by Andreessen early in those days, or at least part of that. Those were just some that kind of come to mind as just some of the early points where really Miami was starting to kind of pick up steam, and Knight Foundation was starting to invest more and more in the ecosystem. And I think that's really the one thing I will say about those early days is that we were assessing the ecosystem based on what I consider now to be more vanity metrics, right? So it was the amount of folks through the door, it was the amount of startups created, it was much more quantitative versus qualitative, and I think that's another. I'm sure we'll circle back to the now, right, and what the goals are now. But I think that's if there's one thing that if I could go back in time, would be not to worry about having to pack the lab every single day, and really just, as opposed to filling it with 300 folks that were interested in tech, really identifying those 30 that showed some incredible promise and putting more of those resources behind just those 30.
Yeah, it's interesting, kind of the different chapters of this story. I think someone's got to write a book, the Miami tech wave.
Nancy will write that book.
Calling the call out again. But in that phase, it did seem like it was important to just kind of grow the mass and volume and things. And now we're in such a different place in the ecosystem where I think people are looking for more curated, more kind of quality content or quality startups or quality founders, quality engineers, things like that. And it's a good problem to have. It's just different from that phase where it was just like more.
I mean,
I'll
pose it to you guys. I mean, between Shrimp Society and Venture Miami and all that stuff. I mean, you guys were certainly part of building community as well, and I think in a different part of Miami's evolution or different time in Miami's evolution. I mean, what was it for you guys that was, I guess, exciting or the right time to do that? I mean, obviously you had a very supportive administration, but it was more than just that, right? I mean, what was it? What was the fertility that allowed you to grow that community?
I think for the Shrimp Society, we started curated where it was private dinners with just founders, and I would go on LinkedIn and find. We skewed. I think I was like 26 or something, or 25. So I was looking for other builders under 30, and there was kind of an unofficial rule about that. And then we grew past that, but everyone had to be an active full-time founder. And then as you kind of grow and you get more size, then those things start to, rules kind of skew of like, okay, now we can accept this. Okay, maybe you're not full-time. But there's also a driver on, the sponsorship dollars, which was kind of like the Shrimp Society's main revenue generator. It was sponsorships, and sponsors want to see eyeballs, or they want to see, a really valuable, smaller cohort. And so we had a little bit of that challenge too as we expanded, and then we did our whole NFT membership, and we had members in New Orleans, and it was like we were trying to serve them, but our mission was really in Miami. And so it's interesting, the more you grow, it does create a kind of a dilution of that core thing, and you got to be consistent on that. Otherwise, it can kind of bubble into something that is not serving the main mission. But I think to your question, at that time, I started the Shrimp Society before COVID and before that huge influx of people. And I think what worked for us is we just harnessed that. Is there was not really any place for early stage startup founders. And so with all those people coming here, it was one option, and we were also young and dumb and threw a bunch of events during COVID, and just so we didn't have a lot of rules like a big organization. So we did a bunch of fun stuff. But I think just helping kind of like allowing people to plug in immediately and get connected, I think was the main thing that helped us grow. What do you think with Venture Miami?
I mean, it's funny you talk about vanity metrics. At the end of the day, people still care about them because getting massive amount of people in a room and getting massive amount of people in programs and getting a bunch of engagement and saying, oh man, like I wish I was there at those things respectively, drives those sponsors that actually end up supporting programs predominantly. And the question that comes in when you do a program is like, where does the cost lie? It's like, yes, there is some value add to both the community, to those individuals, and probably to the organization itself. Where does the cost fall? And so when you, based on what metrics you decide to choose, right, whether it's how far a company is supposed to go or how many people get to a certain point, you can start to lay the cost in different ways. So for us, it was, hey, if I can get 100 people, and I remember having this conversation with Chris when we were co-building the whole entire thing. If you get 100 people to get to X point, that looks really good, and other people like how that looks, and other people will say, I put some money up to support a program that got people to this point where the point was building a product and putting that product out in space and having it be in a way that other people can consume it, right, or be users of said products. That ended up creating an environment where you can have that be like a repeatable thing to take to sponsors. But then you start getting to a point where we're a little bit, I don't want to say hoity-toity, but like we care about like the essence of what being an entrepreneur is, which is building a successful business. And so the rub starts to come in where you can only help so many people at the exact same time have a very successful business in a respective program. It's like, can you take 100 people and have them all be successful? To within that period of time? Very unlikely to do so within that specific period of time. So your only option is to shrink the number. And so like as you go through this process, your metrics start changing, your focus starts changing, and then the things that would have initially garnered you support in one way where the cost would have been absorbed starts to veer in a different direction. The one thing that I had the benefit of is that I was at the city. So a lot of the cost was absorbed based on the fact that people going through said program were indicators of economic progression or opportunity is a better way to put it. There is a better opportunity for them to be able to garner something financially, personal financial building, if they were able to make businesses in one way or were to be in what effectively was a business community, but then to be a part of other programs. And so somebody might come through, and Chris and me talked about this plenty of times. Hey, 20% of these people are pure service providers. It's like, that's what they're building. That's what they have. They don't have a full-blown product, but that's okay because they might end up serving some of the other people in the rest of the community. Great problem to have, but then also changes what the focus of the program ends up being at the end of the day. So there's a lot of good things around that respectively, but I said a purist. I think that's the best way. When you start to become a purist about it, and you're like tech startups, you have to dramatically shift what you care about and what you want to have happen, because then you have to start asking people and saying, hey, seriously, are you a tech startup or are you not? And does that matter to us or does it not, right? Does Miami need to only be focused exclusively on tech startups so that we position ourselves in a particular type of way or not, right? So all these questions start to come up, and one thing that I could say is during that time at Venture Miami, we were able to avoid that question because economic development looks like people getting any type of personal wealth building or economic empowerment. And so any business that you would make is a good thing. It's just a civic support of economic engagement. And so any way that you're able to build a business or build wealth or income for yourself, we don't care. We just want you to get there in an efficient manner. And that efficient manner was building community around it respectively.
Yeah, you said something earlier, Danny, around Miami being an entrepreneurial city, and I think Miami is the best hustler city. And I think hustler, there's a bad connotation of hustler too, but there's also a good connotation of hustler, which is people just hustle. From the person who has a fruit truck and is selling
Yeah.
that, or if
Yeah.
I buy something on Facebook Marketplace, I go to someone's house and it looks like an Amazon warehouse. I'm like, I don't know what's going on here,
Yeah.
but there's some hustle that's going on, and like,
Out of necessity,
yeah,
right?
yeah, it's
Because
interesting.
they're immigrants, or they didn't have access to education or whatever it was, and yet they see the opportunity. They're trying to provide for their family. They're trying to lift their family out of a certain socioeconomic status, and so I think that's a big driver for it. I think if you look at some of the other tech hubs like San Francisco or New York or Boston, it's also just like cool to be a part of that ecosystem, and it's like it's valuable. It's not just about the money that it brings, but it's just the I guess the respect, or I'm blanking on like the exact word for it here, but it's like not in crowd either, but it's
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of like if you're into finance, you probably want to work on Wall Street, right? It's got a certain
Exactly.
cachet or something to it.
yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you were there. You were in New York,
Mhm.
2015. What brought you back? You made a change.
The pandemic, actually.
Okay.
So no, I was.
It brings everything.
Yeah, yeah.
We all come back.
So 2015, again, we moved to New York. My wife, Sabrina, who now works at Google, was doing her MBA at Columbia. I started working at NYU for the Berkeley Center for Entrepreneurship, running a couple of accelerator programs for them, Mobile App Accelerator, this kind of year-long business planning competition that they ran, and then our summer accelerator program, the Stern Venture Fellows, which was for folks in the business school, mostly undergrad or grad, who were just kind of working on a venture. And Stern cranks out a lot of finance folks, so unfortunately, a lot of those folks gave up on their idea to take those high-paying Wall Street jobs.
Yep.
But a few of them stuck with it, and have had tremendous success. So very, very proud of those programs over time. But left for a couple of years to actually work on a project not too dissimilar to the lab called SciTech City. It was also a public-private partnership with the city of Jersey City and the Liberty Science Center, which is a big museum there. For those that have been to New York, I'm sure if they grew up in the New York area, they definitely did a field trip or two to LSC. But the city of Jersey City had awarded them 16 acres of adjacent land to build kind of like a tech campus, and so it was helped them put together the initial site planning and get the title and the rights to the land, and how to kind of help raise the first bit of money and put together the project partners, and then just like any other
Did they come to you, or did you propose
what
this as a concept?
Yeah. They were already kind of working on it, and they knew that they were going to get the land, and they needed like the right
people
concept to kind of bring it together. And then with any other public-private partnership that involves real estate and the transfer of public land to a private entity and all this stuff, it was going to take a couple of years, a few years to finalize all that stuff. And I get antsy, and I can't wait. And so went back to NYU and started running those accelerators. Then it was then that I really started focusing on Simple, my spirits company. And then the pandemic just brought us back. Sabrina and I we lived in a one-bedroom Williamsburg apartment, and when they said, hey, work from home for the next couple of weeks, this whole thing's going to blow over, we're like, even for the 2 weeks, we're like, we're going to, our marriage is going to be on thin ice if we try to survive every single day, every hour of every single day together in our little one-bedroom apartment. So we decided to come back. We're both from Miami, and 2 weeks turned into 2 months, turned into 2 years. We ended up getting pregnant and buying a house, and I think the goal was always for us to come back to Miami. We knew it's where we wanted to kind of build our family. I think the pandemic accelerated things for her being in kind of bigger kind of corporate tech. A big part for her was like coming back to Miami needed to be that she would have certain opportunities available to her, and so the pandemic kind of provided that opportunity and kind of remote work and being able to work for a company like Google from Miami. And Google's got a great presence down here, but that was definitely a big part of it. And
Can I ask you a question on that?
Yeah.
I hear that a lot about people who are in corporate tech, and one of their biggest reservations is coming to Miami specifically and not necessarily knowing where they would transition into. If, let's say, their corporate position, either they don't want to be it anymore, they want to transition out of it. Like, how was that conversation when you guys had it?
We still have it actively. It's a scary thing.
It's
I mean,
interesting.
yeah,
No one talks about that.
Yeah. It's a big part of Vision 2.0, if you will. Then here, like, you know, for the lab is, it's no longer just about how do you attract these people. I think there's a good ecosystem. It's getting better. There are good opportunities down here. They're getting better as well. But you know, there's still this fear of, hey, there's not a ton of opportunities. So if I don't like my job anymore, let's say they just decide, hey, this job can't be remote anymore. You have to go report back to one of your main hubs. It's a hard decision to make, right? And you know, after we now have 2 kids, and like, you know, we're very comfortable with our lives down here, and it's like it's hard to all of a sudden make that choice. But you know, for Lab 2.0, it's how do we bring more of those opportunities here? How do we convince these big kind of corporate tech companies to invest in hubs here in South Florida, and not just have more opportunities for folks like my wife and other kind of mid-senior level, you know, folks here that, you know, that they feel comfortable not just moving here but staying here, and that there will be a plan B or a plan C, or, you know, all that stuff. So, you know, how to do that, I don't know. I don't think the lab can solve all those things, but I think I know of a couple of folks that are working on, you know, kind of building community and pipelines of opportunities for folks like that. And so, you know, we'll do whatever we can to support them, because we, you know, it's no longer about building up Miami's ecosystem, but making sure that it's a place that not only attracts folks but retains them.
It's almost like fortifying, you know? It's
Yeah.
like, how do you
Make it
really...
more robust?
Yeah, because I think about, you know, we just finished the Reefside Accelerator, and, you know, the company's in there, they have some funding, they have some revenue, and a pretty common ask is like, who is a senior experienced marketer that does XYZ, or a senior experienced salesperson, or, you know, we have a CTO, but we need someone who's really experienced on this specific technology or something like that. And most of those people, maybe there's freelancers, right, that kind of have a consulting business, and there's good ones around Miami that do that. But yeah, that kind of group, how do we pull them into this tech community, either for mentorship or freelance work or just experience share? Because obviously they're pushing technology as well. It's still all in tech and things. It's just different from what you think of, you know,
The
5-person
founder
team.
and
Yeah.
But it's important, and they need that community, right? Because they're freaking out. They don't know who to talk to. Like, talking to another startup founder is like, they don't want to talk to some other bright-eyed person. They also don't want to talk to, you know, the C-suite that does live here and is happy to stay here, right? And, you know, whatever. They need to connect more with their peers and hear that there are other opportunities and things like that. So
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think, like, I think of it almost like, you know, if you're on Wall Street and you go to Deloitte or you go to Goldman Sachs, you come in with that internship class of 200 other people that are that same age, and you kind of all grow. Some people grow faster than others. Some people take other jobs, and it creates just this network where you have deep connection. And I think one of the reason that, you know, these startup communities in the lab and what we're doing works is because, you know, the startup founder is super lonely. Like, they don't have that other cohort. Maybe they have some friends that are into it, but a lot of times they don't. And it's kind of like you need that peer group, that class almost, that when people start growing, and then if your venture doesn't work out, they can hire you because they, you know, were your friend for 2 years and saw you build this company. It didn't work out. And it's interesting that for, I don't know what we should call it, like tech professionals, senior tech professionals.
Just mid to senior level tech professionals. They're just in their condos and apartments and houses doing work, amazing work, and we don't ever see them, and they're just remote, and they're like, where are all these people at? They're like, they're at home. They're at home just doing their work, doing an amazing job, but we never see them, and we don't really know that they're here.
Yeah, and having them take the opportunities. I think of Michael from Be There, right? Experienced guy, built
Very
out Uber Eats in Miami. He was very successful, and now he's building a startup, Be There. And the more that can happen too, if you have someone who's like, hey, we've done some impressive things inside, you know, entrepreneurship, and now can take those skills to new venture, I think is interesting. So what is your vision for the Rebirth Lab 2.0?
Man, it's a very layered question. I mean, there's lots of stuff. I mean, you know, I struggle with this as an entrepreneur, especially as a social entrepreneur. Is like I want to help everybody, but I know that that's one, not sustainable, and two, not going to be all that effective. And so I think we're still trying to figure out exactly who we are best suited to help, and who, and what other kind of aspects of the ecosystem we could just play more of a supporting role in. I think some of that comes through analysis and studying the problem. Some of it just comes with, experimenting and being ready to, pivot and make changes. If we look at other ecosystems, you have other ecosystems that are supported by, a very active economic development agency, or there's a big company that, pivots more into tech or whatever. Or you had, big exits, right? And San Francisco obviously has a ton of those, but you talk about like the PayPal mafia and how that then spurred all that, right? So I think for us, that's what Miami has been missing. We have had some big exits down here and certainly some big raises, but you look at someone like Chewy. No disrespect to Chewy, Chewy crushed it, but that's not the tech, right? That's not the tech that we're talking about, and I'm not sure how much the Chewy team has done to kind of then try to get another Chewy to come through the ecosystem, right, or other tech companies to come through.
Unfortunately, we never see those people.
Right.
I actually don't know. I know that they're far up a little bit up the South Florida coast and everything, and they've done amazing work and they've done great things, and I've never heard about it. Not except for like having made an ask or talked to somebody personally, but like I love to hear their stories and love to see what they're working on and love to see what they're doing. But to your point,
there are some interesting kind of big-ish tech companies around South Florida that you don't hear about, like Akamai and Alienware and stuff like that.
And Alienware's been here for a while.
And sometimes built in Miami, we had a couple people from Alienware, and I'm like, these guys are
Alienware is amazing.
And I'm like, where's the rest of your team? Let's get everybody in here. It is interesting, Miami versus South Florida, something a lot of people like to talk about. I think it's so similar to San Francisco, where you have a city core and then you have San Jose. And
but
stuff.
It just doesn't feel like
it doesn't.
that.
Yeah, I don't know
like,
why.
We used to joke all the time. It's like, I need my passport to get to Broward because of how much it feels that you're just taking this huge trip where, to your point, it's probably no further distance from SF to like where people actually are.
San Jose
and stuff like that. So it's a weird, depiction of about how we like travel in South Florida in that respect. But it is I don't want to say it's an issue, but I don't know, it's a narrative or a stereotype. It's something that's there that causes friction. It's friction.
Yeah.
So I mean, look, I think what vision 2 for the lab is, one, obviously bring great people together, because I still think that not think I'm like uber confident and we'll take this belief to the grave with me, but like you got smart people in the room and like prompt them in the right ways, and not necessarily intentional serendipity, but like you create the right environment and you give them smart people a reason to connect. They'll connect and build something else, right? So just like let serendipity happen. But I think for the lab, it's being a supportive partner for the many things that this ecosystem needs and for the many people that are doing wonderful things in this ecosystem. And then I think for us specifically as an organization is, how do we identify the 10 to 15 founders, builders, companies that have the best chance of bringing in a massive exit, and cultivating, nurturing them, supporting them through that exit and keeping them here throughout that entire life cycle. Not, once they get to that Series B, Series C raise that typically lures them away and takes them to San Francisco or New York. Like, how do we double down our efforts then at that time and make sure that they stay here, so that when they do have that massive exit, they create the XYZ mafia for Miami, right? And continue to invest in the ecosystem and finally put, not that Miami's not on the map, but without that real big win, we'll be on the map for the noise we make, not for our track record.
Yeah,
right?
That was super frustrating during the tail end, or I guess during the COVID era, where it was just a lot of lot of news hype, I remember there was like articles in TechCrunch and then another like Wired
It was
magazine.
good. It served a purpose, but like, you know.
And then it was always, even though we were getting noise and getting out there, then the criticisms on Twitter or whatever, like, oh, this is all just noise. And it's like, okay, give us one, you know? Like, what do you want?
It's a chicken or the egg, right?
Yeah,
It's like, you have to do that, right? You have to show, you have to bring in the people, you have to have those metrics to say, hey, look, I want to be a part of that.
100%. We're definitely second wave of these tech ecosystem concept, right? Like you were mentioning them before. Your SF, your Boston, your New York, and where am I missing? I might be missing one other place, but those three in particular, they have built up this groundswell based on assets that they have within their respective ecosystems. We now are like looking at that, trying to like mirror some aspects of it, at least in terms of the aspect of growth, and are trying to figure out what makes sense for us, what's going to work for us. And when you do that enough, at least based on what Miami is, our biggest asset is being visible. It's like that's a huge asset that we have. And so while people might, put that down in different ways, we should use that to the best of our ability as possible. We need to follow it up as much as we can. We do need large exits. We need significantly more people more easily moving from C to A, like to widen the berth of how many people are actually going to end up getting a full exit, right? That there's too many times where people who are already either post A or even B move into Miami and they continue to do their work, as opposed to, hey, I created said company here, or at least moved in when I was pre-seed and then took the journey and got investment respectively. And as we already talk about all the time, there's not enough people that are actually investing in those respective companies along those journeys. It's other investors that are outside of Miami that are propping up those investments that are happening inside of Miami. And so at the end of the day, we got to use what we got to use, right?
Yeah.
And we'll start to figure out what substantively we can build up after that. But to your point, we do need an exit.
Yeah, Danny, to put you on the hot seat, I mean, what is that winning recipe to keep someone who's raised a big seed or Series A in Miami and the founder is here, and maybe the founding team is here? What do you think is that? It's almost like sports. We were laughing about, LeBron coming back to the Heat, and it is kind of like, well, when you have a startup like that, it does affect ticket sales. It affects concession sales, merch sales, stuff like that. And in a sense, feels like we need to almost
like that.
Recruit or I don't know if recruits, but
you guys just come up with that?
Yeah, take your talents to South Beach.
Yeah,
come on, let's do it.
I'm gonna make some shirts.
No, for real. I'm
sending them around to Y Combinator's cohort.
Why not, man?
What's needed? I mean, I think and it might sound like a cop-out answer, but it's going to be different on each startup, right?
Yeah.
Not every startup is going to need. They might be very successful at raising funding, and then their complaints are going to be like, oh, there's no talent, or people say that all the time about Miami. Oh, there's no talent. There's no talent. It's like we meet with engineers all day long. There is a ton of talent. That talent is just tired of going to empty, uninspiring events here in Miami. Happy hours are great. They don't want to go to another happy hour. Some of these talks are great, but they don't want to hear about another founder talk about themselves for 2 hours. They want to learn something, right? I think we all are, right? And so, so each startup is going to be a little bit different. It might be, access to Fortune 100 companies. I don't know, depending what they are. Maybe they're a SaaS company or whatnot, right? So I think it's gonna depend on the founder, and it's a mentality, right? So what's the magic? There is no magic bullet. So the best thing you could do is just like be willing to provide whatever resource that truly high impact founder or team needs, and be able to provide it quickly. Because especially with AI, the rate of entrepreneurship and technology and growth and all this stuff, it's like if you can't do it within 6 to 12 months, you probably won't do it, or someone else is going to do it. They're going to beat you to the punch, right? So AI, I also think, has been like incredibly democratizing and creates opportunities for Miami, because you don't need to build a 100-person dev team now. You definitely need developers. AI is not going to do everything for you.
Sure.
Don't get me wrong. Lovable does incredible things for making you feel like you've built your next business. But like there's you're building a lot of tech debt and you don't really know what you're doing. You're trusting a lot in what the AI has generated for you. So you still need engineers, but there's a lot of stuff that you don't need as big of a team. and you can do things a bit quicker. And so, we'll I guess the call to action is, if you know some high impact folks, encourage them to come to the lab, and we're happy to have a conversation about what they need and support them however we can.
I love it. Well, I want to shift gears to a topic less talked about that I'm personally excited to talk about because we never talk about it. And that is your spirits brand, Simple, which crushes it, is in restaurants all over the place. This guy's so humble, had no idea. And,
well, how many though? He told me it was a lot, but I actually didn't know how.
So, we're quite popular in Texas. Here in Miami, we're mostly in a lot of the Wynwood kind of accounts and locations. The idea actually started here. So we started Simple just about the time I moved to New York. Again, that was very much in the ideation phase at that point, but we had launched in 2017. Just to kind of give a quick high level on Simple. So we are a give back brand. So we are produced here in America, and for every drink serving that we produce, we donate a meal to someone in need, and we do that through direct support of local and national hunger relief organizations. So everyone from Feeding America and No Kid Hungry / Share Our Strength down to individual food banks and pantries in the markets that we operate in. So like the Miami Rescue Mission, which is down the street, to Bowery Mission up in New York, and a handful of other food banks and pantries. We're not recreating the impact wheel there. We're supporting the organizations that are doing incredible work there. And most of what those donations go towards is last mile logistics. Folks like, Feeding America, they're massive. They're probably the second or third largest, nonprofit network in the country, and they're probably the second or third largest shipper in the country. They have massive fulfillment centers, and their biggest issue is, they're getting produce or foodstuffs from kind of larger retailers that don't want to send it to the landfill, but it's totally, still good. A bruised apple is not going to sell, but a bruised apple is still going to, taste great, right? Make a great apple pie, whatever it is. But when that food is donated to an organization like Feeding America has to do quick quality control, keep it cool for a day or two, and then get it out to the particular food bank or pantry that needs that apple that day, right? So what we end up paying for is that last mile logistics, storing it for a day or two, and then getting it onto a truck and delivering it to this particular food bank or pantry that needs it. So, started a spirits company to draw awareness to the issue of food insecurity and meaningfully contribute back. And we had no intentions of starting a spirits company. We actually were very close to launching as a table salt.
Really?
Yes. So we had built a product thesis.
Salt?
It's gonna be Simply Salt. I don't know if we had.
It got a nice ring to it. That's what I was like. That's not bad.
I don't know if we even had the name Simple yet. But the idea was we wanted to target products that were ubiquitous, people were consuming every day, but no one had a very strong preference or brand association with a particular type of product, right? So salt is one of those things that's literally everywhere, right? We have salt here at the lab. We have, there's salt in every restaurant. Salt is everywhere. There's bath salts. There's, not the drug bath salts, but Epsom salts to help you relax.
Yeah, there's everything.
So salt is everywhere, but, few people can tell you, they might be able to tell you what kind of salt they use. So a pink Himalaya or sea salt or whatever, but few can tell you the actual brand, right? And so that was the opportunity for us at the time. Not nearly as attractive or sexy for investors as a spirits company.
No,
and so
a little different pitch.
So we had, it was before I moved to New York, and I was reviewing quotes from salt manufacturers. I was reviewing them at Wood Tavern, which had just opened up. It was Wynwood's first bar, thank goodness. It came just in time to help us, keep our community lubricated and sustained down here. But I was reviewing salt quotes, and it seemed like every other drink being ordered was a vodka drink. It was either a Moscow Mule or a vodka soda or this cocktail or that cocktail, and it just had this aha moment. Kind of checked all the other boxes, within the product thesis, and said, "Hey, why not? Let's start a spirits company." 10 years later-ish, a little less than 10 years later, I kind of wish I would have started a salt company. The liquor industry is extremely regulated and complicated, and very nepotistic and oligarchical and all sorts of like crazy things I'll say. But, you know, it's also, it's taught us a big lesson in humility. And, you know, it takes a lot more than just having a really good product. It's about building relationships with people. And, you know, unlike tech, spirits is all about being in person and consuming this. I can't, you know, give you a drink online.
Yeah,
and it's not infinitely scalable. You got to go somewhere to enjoy that drink. And so, you know, it's very different. And that's probably why we don't talk about it as much, because here at the lab, there's, well, you know, we have powered a few happy hours here at the lab from time to time, but, you know, and so, yeah. And, you know, over the last couple of years, the pandemic almost killed us. We're able to, you know, kind of keep things alive. And by the end of 21, we were, you know, had surpassed pre-pandemic levels. We made a very important decision during that time to focus mostly in Texas. So at that point, we were in Miami, in Texas, New York, Louisiana. We were starting to kind of spread out. And, you know, we kept coming back to this. And we have to own our own backyard. And that was a big back and forth between, was that Florida or was that Texas? Texas, where we had more of the reach at that point, but Florida was actually our backyard. And, you know, we made the hard decision. And, you know, it was hard for me specifically being here in Miami and, you know, based in Florida, to have that be Texas. But Texas is absolutely crushing it, you know, for us. And we've been able to tack on a few other spirits. So we now have a gin brand. We have an agave
What edged
spirit.
it out for you, if you don't mind me asking?
Wait, what?
What edged it out for you? Like, what did Texas have that, like,
The relationships.
The relationships? Okay.
Right. So is, you know, it's the liquor industry has a mandated 3-tier system. So as a supplier, we can only sell to distributors, and distributors can only sell to wholesalers. Wholesalers are the only ones that can sell to consumers. Okay. So while we as the brand, the supplier, have to market to the end consumer, our client is really the distributor, whose client is the wholesaler, whose client is the consumer.
Interesting.
Right. So if you don't have alignment with your distributor and your wholesalers and your retailers, like, you're never going to reach the consumer. Right. So Florida is a bit more of a Wild West, and the partners change from time to time, whereas Texas, there's a pretty set network of folks that if you're able to build relationships with them, you can really, you know, you can move mountains in an industry that is known for immovable objects.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's really what helped, you know, edge it out for us. And, you know, we tacked on a gin and an agave spirit, which forced us to get our importer's license, since both of those things we make the vodka. It's potato vodka made in Idaho. Our gin is made in the UK, and our agave spirit is made down in Puebla, Mexico. And so since we had two spirits that were outside of the country, we got our importer's license, and the importer's license pretty much sitting there, not doing much most of the year. It's just when we're producing and bringing the stuff in. And so we actually started using the importer's license to work with other small brands to kind of lower the barrier of entry for them to penetrate the U.S. market. Because right now the alternative is for them to pay $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 a month to some of these distributors to test markets, right? To test opportunities. And so, you know, we've been able to offer them much lower rates and more of an incubation period where we actually waive all fees to let them test a market with just, you know, a pallet of product at a time, see if it works. If it doesn't, great. If it does, it goes really well. You know, we may not be the best importer or, you know, distributor for you long term, but, you know, you help enough folks, and eventually things fall, you know, shake from the tree. And
it's kind of like your accelerator
exactly,
model, and the startup methodology to it. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. Most people, I mean, when they come to me and they say, hey, I have an idea for a liquor company, you know, what do you think? I tell them to run. I tell them to give up, forget it. Like, don't even try. Like, here's all the reasons why it's not going to work. If they come back, you know, a week later and they say, you know what, I'm still crazy enough, I still want to do this, then okay, let's figure this out. How can we make this work, right? But it's like, you
gotta give them the disclaimer.
Yeah, no, you really gotta be like, look, this is not going to work. I promise you. And if they're still crazy enough to believe it is, then they might have something that is really special, and or they might have the capacity to build the relationships that are so necessary, or, you know, whatever it is. Whatever it is for the particular industry.
Amazing. And where can people go to support it, to buy it? They got to come to the lab, do a happy hour here to try it.
In Miami, unfortunately, yes. You know, they could go to Coyo Taco, Dante's Hi-Fi, 1-800-Lucky, a bunch of other places here in Wynwood. If you're listening to this in Texas, you go to any fine Specs liquor store throughout the state. And we're mostly concentrated in bars and restaurants in Houston, Dallas, and increasingly so Austin, San Antonio, some of the other kind of smaller cities there.
Awesome.
Which are still massive cities for anywhere else. But yeah, so, and, even if you don't drink or you can't find us, I encourage you to, go to Feeding America and consider donating, or looking up volunteer opportunities in your area to support these individual food banks and pantries that need your help in feeding those in need. So, my call to action is not to go grab a drink.
Yeah.
It is one of those fine establishments, but if you can't find it or you don't drink, support hunger relief and food insecurity initiatives in your area.
I love it. That is right in the ethos of our change maker, conversation with change makers. You've made, change here in Miami and then in New York and all over the place. And now with Spirit, it's just such a part of your essence. And so, one, thank you for being a change maker and starting.
Thank you guys
a
for
lot
being
of this
change
stuff.
makers.
We
Can't
have
do this together. Can't do this individually, right? We got to do this together.
100%.
Yeah. So our last question is kind of a hot take, a kind of a call to action, where we'd like you to really call someone out there listening to action on a specific area that you think change needs to be made on, specifically to kind of Miami and South Florida, what we're all trying to do here. So is there a person, I don't mean like call out a specific person, more just like,
Joe,
Bob,
you cut me off this morning.
A category of type
of a personality, a brand, a company, an organization that you feel like either doesn't exist and needs to exist, or does exist and needs to go from a 3 to a 10 in terms of change making. But for someone listening out there, what is your call to action to that person where they can really affect some needed change?
There's many. So I'll give 2.
Perfect.
Okay. So one is somebody needs to step up to fill the void left by the Knight Foundation. The Knight Foundation was extremely impactful and supportive of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and it shouldn't be the Knight Foundation's responsibility to keep it going forever. Mm-hmm. One, because the ecosystem needs to have build sustainability for itself. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think that should happen from just one specific founder or funder and supporter. But it did leave a massive void. You talk about sponsors and where the costs lie. Sponsors just want to cover the hard costs.
Yep.
They're not supporting the organizations, right? And so that's not really building sustainability for these organizations, right? So I think someone or some group or entity, and Tech Equity has done a pretty good job of picking up some of the slack. But I think more still needs to be done, especially for a bigger and more robust ecosystem that exists now. Mm-hmm. So that's one. 2, I think, is everyone who's currently listening that has never voted in a mayoral election. So we were talking about this before. Even with Francis's last win, I think there was 27,000 votes cast for mayor.
Insane to me. Blows my mind.
Dude. I don't think we've ever surpassed, or at least not in decades, 30,000 votes cast.
Yeah, I don't think so.
So
smaller than the Heat Arena.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yes.
That's a great way to put it.
Yes.
That's an amazing way to put it.
Yeah, actually, so that's what the Heat should do, or the Dolphins should do. We'll make one game free per year, but you got to vote. You got to vote. So recently, and very recently, within the last couple of months or even a few weeks, they decided to move the election, I think, to 2026.
Yeah, it's been put up.
Yeah, it's been put up.
Yeah.
So otherwise, it was going to happen in November, and no one knew that there was a mayoral election. And so, and if you look back at what really helped Miami during the pandemic, wasn't just the pandemic and that Florida was open for business and all that stuff. We had an administration that was very supportive and made that noise and did all that stuff, right? So we need more administrations like we've had recently to continue the momentum and continue to grow the ecosystem and attract the right people and advocate for the right policies. So it's one, be engaged, support individuals who are running for mayor that you believe are going to be good for the ecosystem. And for bleep's sake, go vote. Okay, let's pass 30,000 votes this next election. That would be great. I'd love to see that.
I love it.
Okay.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Danny. This was a pleasure.
Cool. Great to be
Where
here.
can people find you? At the lab, I guess?
Here at the
At
lab,
dock?
about an office or two down from the podcast studio. You'll find me most days. Otherwise, you can shoot me an email at daniel@thelabmiami.com.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Thanks
all
so
right,
much,
man.
Danny. That's it. That's the pod. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.